For our demonstration purposes, we don't have a large number of data items, but the principle of the pivot table can easily be utilized on a much larger data set if you know how you would like to present them. We have been supplied with a list of all interim journal entries posted and need to organize it by account number. As you can see, there are a number of entries per account number, and in the current format, it is difficult to see what the interim balance per each account should be. To begin with the pivot table, on the ribbon, we go to Insert, then Pivot Table. The Create Pivot Table window will appear. We need to tell Excel which table we want to use as our source. In this instance, it is the table at the top of the worksheet and runs from A1 through F11. For pivot tables, we need to include column headings, so before inserting a pivot table, ensure that the source data has column headings. At the bottom of the wizard, Excel allows you to choose where you want to place the pivot table, either on the original worksheet or on a new one. For this example, we will place it in the existing worksheet, but in practice, it is often easier if it is on its own worksheet. The pivot table field list will populate on the right-hand side of the screen. This field list will allow you to modify and customize how the journal entry data is organized. For our demonstration purposes, we are going to drag the account field to the row labels area of the pivot table field list and click and drag the interim balances to the value section of the pivot table field list. The result is a list of all the account numbers and their aggregated balances. We can check that the pivot table has transposed the data correctly by summing the original table's interim balances, and they also total to 0. As you can see, the data in the pivot table is currently very summarized. What if we wanted the ability to tell which dates each journal entry was passed to each account? We click back on the pivot table so that the pivot table field list appears and select the entry date and drag it into the row labels area. As you can see, the pivot table now has the dates listed under each account as well as the balance. We can click on the minuses to decrease the amount of detail back to the final interim balances if we like. If we had a much larger data set that included similar descriptions for a large number of the journal entries, we could tell the pivot table to filter the report based on the account description. In order to do this, we would go back into the pivot table field list and click and drag the account description into the report filter area. As you can see, a report filter at the top of the pivot table has appeared. If we want to change the data selected by the pivot table, we can change the report filter to only show description 10 detail and click OK. If we click on the plus signs, we can see that the pivot table is only showing the data with the description 10 in the pivot table. This was a very simplified version of a pivot table, showing you the basics about sorting and summarizing data. In practice, you may need to play around a little with the report filters and row tables in your own pivot tables in order to derive the data in the format that you would like to display it.